Is money putting stress on you and your current relationship? Do you fear you are going to go bankrupt if you and your partner don't find common ground? Do you think your partner is crazy due to how much money they spend? Well, today on The Father Show, we've got some answers for you. Don't go away. Stay tuned. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us here on The Father Show. And I'm your host, Mike Thompson. Today, we've got a great show. But before we get to that, I want to, if you haven't subscribed to the show, please do. And hit that notification bell so that way you'll be notified whenever we put up a show, which is usually once a week. So we want to thank you for that. But today we've got a fantastic show, and I have a young man that's going to be on the show. And that man is Mr. Ed Coambs. And Ed is a international recognized thought leader in financial therapy who has been cited by the Wall Street Journal, the Associated Press, Time, and CNBC. Now, he leads couples through therapy from financial despair and frustration into financial intimacy and connection using the latest in love and brain science. Earned his master's degree in business counseling and financial planning, and is a licensed marriage and family therapist, certified planner, and certified therapist. I mean, that's a lot. This man has been doing quite a bit, and I'm so glad to have him on the show. So without really further ado, I want you everybody to welcome Ed Coambs. Ed, how you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. Thanks for inviting me onto your show today, and appreciate the very warm introduction.
Man, you have got a lot of work behind you.
It still surprises me how much work I have behind me. The little fact known for a lot of people that know me now is I was actually more of a jock in high school, not much of a student, but most of the people that meet me these days just assume that I was a bookworm from the beginning. That's been a later incarnation. So, yeah.
So how did that come about?
Well, I got really fortunate. After I finished high school, I became a professional firefighter, and we had a lot of time sitting around the station, and I had aspirations of being a fire chief. So the city had a program where they would pay for me to go to college, and I studied at the fire station and started working on my undergraduate degree, and one thing led to another. Met my wife, who was in dental school. That's when the lights really started going on. I mean, I studied some, but man, when I met her, she was finishing up, and I was like, the only way I can spend time with her is to study. And so we studied. It's so obvious now, and your listeners probably know this already, but studying equals better grades. It's not a complex formula, but I hadn't connected those pieces fully. But I saw my grades get better, and I'm hanging out. Obviously, a dentist is a smart person, and all our friends, and so it really has been a gift to step more into my own intelligence and academic ability.
Oh, well, good. They always say a good woman, if you find a good man, she's got a good woman behind him.
That's going to be more true for me.
Yeah, they have a tendency to straighten us out, push us a little harder than we may go. And that's good. That's good.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
But firemen, that's something.
Yeah. It's I tell people I went from running into burning buildings into burning down marriages.
Yeah, which one would you rather do?
Oh, some days I might like to go back to the burning buildings, but truth be told, it's really an honor to work with couples and to help them from their place of distress and despair. I mean, I'm a couples therapist.
Yeah.
By the time they're coming to me, they're having a relationship heart attack, most cases.
So, what is a financial therapist and why is it so important in any relationship?
Well, Mike, it's going to sound really obvious, but we all have a personal relationship with money. And the reality is there's nowhere in society where we can go to really reflect on our personal relationship with money without any judgment or expectation or that. And the reality is, at a deeper level, a lot of people have conflict with money in their life and often with their family members. And so the role of the financial therapist is to understand healthy or good financial practices. That's certainly a key part. But it's also important that the financial therapist understands psychology, how the mind, the brain, the body work in relationship with other people. And when we start to better understand psychology and the way our mind and brain works, what seems like irrational or very off-putting financial patterns actually make a lot more sense.
Mm-hmm.
It takes a little bit of time to uncover those patterns, but when we can start to see that a lot of times the problematic issues around money are stemming from issues around anxiety, fear, shame, issues around vulnerability, mistrust, the problems start to look very different than, oh, well, he's just being irrational, or she's just being irrational, or she's just so unagreeable, or he just digs in his heels, or he's just trying to control me, or she's just trying to control me, or she'll never stop spending, or he's such a tightwad, right? These are all things that you've probably heard, I've heard in your work with people across time. And so we start to diffuse that interactional pattern and help couples start to look at themselves and their partner from a different angle, and understanding that what's really going on is, as humans and as intimate partners, we're trying to maintain an intimate relationship with our partner. But we don't all come into our intimate partnership fully ready to be trusting, caring, safe, and nurturing. I think that's the ideal. That's what we want a lot of times. But depending on our family background and our experiences, we may not come in fully with all the psychological resources that we need to be able to do that. So that's where, being a therapist, I get to help couples start to develop those abilities.
Yeah, because I must agree. I know anytime you get into a relationship, you have a past, and that past is going to be coming with you. And even from before that, whatever you have learned from your parents or from church or from your grandparents in regards to around money, comes into play.
Yeah, we have all of these diverse inputs about money and what we should do with it. And the very first ones we get are from our parents and our family. And what's interesting to think about for a lot of folks is, when you stop and think about it, is, as a developing child under the age of 5, you have very little autobiographical ability.
Mm-hmm.
Meaning, it's hard to tell the story of what's happening. But what you're very adept at is feeling the feelings of the house. What's going on between mom and dad.
Mm-hmm.
And when you got mom and dad having some sort of conflict about money, they're hearing the words and the emotional tone around it, and that's becoming internalized inside of them.
You're right.
Without even fully knowing and realizing it. Now, the parents aren't doing this in any kind of malicious or pre-planned kind of way. They're stuck, they're being adults, and they're going round and around trying to get things sorted out and getting more angry with each other in many cases. But
go ahead.
So it's being able to start to take on that deeper reflective process of really how these experiences have shaped and influenced me, and what can I do to start to move forward and find a sense of peace when I come into the topic of money.
Yeah.
Right. A lot of people are familiar with kind of the Pavlov dog, bell, saliva, idea, right? It's like, show the meat, the dog drools, ring the bell, then you don't have to do the meat anymore. You just ring the bell and the dog drools.
Right.
Well, money is such a complex stimulus, right? And soon as we think or hear about money, it automatically activates certain responses. And you and I both realize that when we're in automatic responses, we may not always be coming from our best place.
True. Yeah.
That's where we say things that we regret or feel bad about later, or realize maybe there's another way to see things. And so being able to slow that process down, especially around topics of money, and become self-reflective about what's really going on here for me, what's more likely really going on here for them, gives couples a far better chance of working through whatever the financial decision is.
So do you think it's a good idea or worthwhile to come see a person like you even before you get into a relationship? So you understand what your mental thought is about money.
I do think that would be really ideal. It would be preventative medicine, right? Or proactive action. Mm-hmm. Because oftentimes when we're forming that intimate partnership, we already know from the research that we're a bit love blinded. We have neurochemicals that are flooding our brain and causing us to see only the good in the other person. Mm-hmm. And sure, you might have family or friends who are saying that, oh, this one's not so good for you. But when you're in that love blind state, those don't matter so much. But when you come out of that love blinded state, that's when you face the reality. What's different about working with someone like myself versus your family is we can usually ask the same types of questions or get the same issues without provoking defensiveness. Mm-hmm. Right? We can draw people into a little more reflective. The other thing, I've heard it so many times, is, well, I thought that they would change more, or I thought I could change them more than I could. And, that's a common fallacy that a lot of us walk around with. Yeah. And the other side of it is like, it should be relatively easy to change. But, the reality is change is so hard. And part of what stands out to me now is I really never thought I would study brain science, but it's been an area that I've been looking at. And you think about the billions of neural connections that are all in our head that help us see ourselves and see the world. And they've been wiring and firing together for a very long time. Yeah. Getting those patterns to change
overnight.
It ain't happening overnight. Let's just get that clear. It's not happening overnight. It's happening over years, but it doesn't happen automatically. It happens with intention. And people know this intuitively, right? If you want to get stronger biceps, you can't go to the gym and do bicep curls one time and come out and have your biceps toned up. That muscle needs time to stretch and develop. And any of your folks that are like truly know this stuff will say, oh, that guy Ed doesn't know how muscles change that much. You're right, I don't. But the concept, I think we all know, is it takes time for development.
And would you say that when you're getting with a person and you're getting close to deciding that you're going to get married or you want to marry that person, when should they start having these financial conversations?
Sooner the better, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, I'm not saying on your first date you start asking to open the checkbook, but what we do know is that couples really struggle with financial transparency. I've got a colleague, her name is Dr. Emily Kochel. She's doing some really innovative research on couples and financial transparency. Mm-hmm. She's created an incredible scale that measures all these different ways that people will hide money. And a lot of times it's not always overt and intentional deception. It can be more subtle than that. You may not even see that what you're doing is problematic. So financial transparency and being able to even bring that up as a conversation in your developing intimate relationship is going to give you some really important information. What you're going to want to be watching for is this other person defensive about something like this? Are they open to it? If they're defensive about it, then it's going to take some more exploring and understanding. That's probably a little bit of a red flag that there might be something more complicated underfoot. If they're like, oh, I'm really glad you're bringing this up. I'm comfortable. I want to show you what I have. I want to see what you have. That's a good sign that there's probably already some developed degrees of financial security. Now, this is not to say you need to throw this partner out if they're balking at you a little bit, but it is a warning flag that maybe there's going to be some more work that needs to happen here.
Yeah, because you would think if you're going to marry a person, you say, well, I don't necessarily agree with how they spend money, but at least you go into the relationship with your eyes open.
Yes, it's really important to go in with your eyes open, and you are already having interactions around money before you ever get married.
True.
And it evokes feelings for you. And the problem is not necessarily that you may have different preferences or patterns of spending. It's how your partner treats you around that.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So, like, as an example, I have a couple where one person is very interested in adventuring and the other person is more interested in home decor.
Mm-hmm.
You might be able to guess what gender that is. Sorry to play stereotypes. No offense meant. But working with this couple around how do you not minimize your partner that wants to have money to spend on updating the house and furnishing it when you value going for an adventure.
Mm-hmm.
There's some rigidity there in that relationship from the male partner who also is the breadwinner. And so we start to add in some of these layer dynamics where it creates a lot of distress for them. And at one level we can say, well, what's the big deal? But the way we decorate our home or the way that we carry out recreational opportunities is a representation of who you are. And it does matter. And so, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Finish up.
I was going to say, this is where I like to try to introduce the concept of financial intimacy to couples.
Okay.
Because financial intimacy is the ability to really know and understand each other and have respect and engage there. And I think couples, that ultimately from sexual intimacy, right? You want to have a compatible sexual relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Ideally, you're shooting for mutual pleasure. The same thing is true in your financial life. How can we create an environment where it's pleasurable for both of us, that we're increasing each other's satisfaction? That becomes a different vision for the way that we're living our financial life together.
Now, let me ask you something that came to mind. A lot of millenniums or fathers are staying home and the wife is going out to work. How can you help a couple that is struggling, with money because she's looking at like, well, I make all the money. You just stay home. So you now have to follow what I say or something like that.
Mike, this topic is a huge one. It's personal to me at some level. I'm not a millennial. Unfortunately, a little older than that. But my wife, being a dentist, has made more money than me for quite a long period of time. And there's a period of time when I stayed home with our youngest son, and I thought I was pretty enlightened and pretty comfortable with it. And the reality is, it really evoked a lot more insecurity than I realized was there. And so I think when I'm working with couples around this dynamic is we really got to be able to create enough vulnerability that they can talk about the insecurities. They can talk about what their stated values and beliefs are and what they're actually feeling. Mm-hmm. Because you have a lot of men that have internalized the general male social expectations of working and making money and being, if not financially equal, if not being the breadwinner.
Yeah.
So even if you're in a place as a millennial where you're saying, I value and I'm okay with women making more money than me, and my partner says that too, that doesn't mean that's fully congruent internally.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so it takes some real vulnerability to be able to recognize that, to name that, to have a partnership where both people can really talk about what that feels like. Because we are seeing that role reversal where women are using their position of financial power and treating it similarly to the way that men have of the past.
Mm-hmm.
I have the money, I get to make the decision.
Mm-hmm. That
creates an inherent power differential. That's not sustainable for an intimate relationship.
No. And it really isn't, because, anytime really, even if you the man and you the breadwinner and the wife stays home, it's still not a good intimacy relationship when you are totally in control of the finance.
Right.
Yeah.
And this is the big picture, and this is the nice thing about working across the generations is when you financially silo and one person takes all the responsibility for large parts of the financial life,
Mm-hmm.
you don't develop financial maturity along the way. And what happens is then when you get along and your partner dies and they were the one that knew how money worked and had been working with it for a long time, you're now dealing with more complicated grief because you're dealing with the loss of your partner and you're having to figure out this whole money world that can feel quite threatening and overwhelming.
Yeah.
And so that's a big part of trying to understand what's going on is how do we help people become more comfortable with navigating the financial world and making it not feel so scary and overwhelming.
Now, you have a book that is out, and I know it's called The Healthy Love and Money Way, How the 4 Attachment Styles Impact Your Financial Well-Being. What are those 4 attachment styles that you're referring to?
I'm glad you asked. Those 4 attachment styles are, let's start simply. They're secure, anxious, avoidant, and disorganized. Now, these are not 4 categories that I've just made up for convenience or marketing. These are categories that are based in the psychological science of human growth and development and relationship formation. They sometimes can go by different names, but we're going to keep it really simple. Okay, secure, anxious, avoidant, and disorganized. What this represents are patterns or ways of being in a relationship with another person, particularly an intimate relationship. But it starts in your early primary caregiving relationships, the way that your mother and father were with you. There's a lot of very interesting neuroscience. We're not going to go all into that, but how our early caregiving experiences start to shape the structure of our neuroanatomy. So we want to imagine that we have all kinds of neuroanatomy in our brain. It's not just one big mush of lump of stuff, right? But our brain is wired to help us form and maintain relationship. If anyone's ever had a baby, they know that baby comes out of the womb ready to bond and connect with the mother, to nuzzle in, to start the gazing process. That's all part of the attachment and bonding process. The way that the parent responds and interacts with that starts to set this internal template and expectation. So the person that develops a secure attachment style in the population roughly is between 50 to 60% of the folks would be categorized as securely attached. In a very simple definition, what that means is that they generally feel pretty comfortable with themselves and can handle managing a wide range of their own emotional responses. When they're in distress or looking for connection, they also have a general trust that the person that they want to connect with wants to be there and wants to connect with them. That's all operating mostly at the unconscious automatic level. The next one is the anxious category. Now, this person has had a different caregiving environment where the caregiver may have been more intrusive or less available, right? They're not able to sense what the developing child needs quite as accurately. And so this child develops a way of starting to over-engage with the parent to try to get their attention. They're always trying to read what their parent's doing to anticipate how to get their own needs met. What they start to internalize at a very unconscious level is that this parent or caregiver can't really understand what's going on with me. I have to understand what's going on with them. So they're always looking to the other person to make sense of their world, or more often looking to another person to make sense of the world. The other side of that is the avoidant continuum. Again, the caregiving environment is either overly intrusive in the child or not available frequently enough, especially when you think about kids fall and scrape their knees. How does the parent respond to that? The kid's hungry. How does the parent respond to that? The kid, is in a fight with their sibling. All these interactions evoke some sort of caregiving response from the parent. The avoidant one starts to adapt to a caregiving environment where they say, I can't trust this caregiver to take care of me. I'm just going to figure it out for myself. They become the ones that are considered very self-reliant and are much less likely to ask somebody else for help with themselves. Okay? The last category is disorganized. This is about 5, maybe 10% of the population, depending on what research you look at. They vacillate between these two. They're often the ones that have the highest levels of trauma in their developmental history. And so those are the 4 categories of attachment styles.
Wow. So how did you come across that? What was your first reaction to learn about attachment styles?
You know, Mike, I love this question. It's a great one because I have to put a little egg on my face. I laugh. So remember, I went from being a firefighter to becoming a financial planner, and all my education was in the business world, management, accounting, finance. This soft stuff, no way, didn't want to deal with it. So I show up for semester 1 in my graduate counseling program, and it's this class called Advanced Developmental Psychology.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, what does that even mean? Didn't know. Well, now I could tell you, it's the study of how humans grow and develop. There's a whole field that specializes in that.
Yeah.
Pretty cool. Well, the professor in one of the lectures is showing this video of some Harry Harlow and his rhesus monkeys. And what it's doing is it's showing how the caregiving environment shapes the level of anxiety in these developing monkeys. And it was my first introduction to attachment, and I didn't really understand it at the time because I'd never heard of it before. But I thought, 1, what does this have to do with me? And 2, I don't want that to be real. And at that deeper level, there's a part of me that didn't want to really accept that my own parents had shaped the way that I experienced intimate relationships. I couldn't have articulated it quite that clearly at the time. But what I know now in working with so many clients is when you have a painful caregiving environment, there are some people that can open and readily acknowledge that, but there's a lot of us that are kind of defensive or guarded about being able to talk about the way that the caregiving environment shaped us. And such a large part of that, you talked about church, and other societal expectations, is this expectation that we're supposed to honor and respect our parents.
Mm-hmm.
That it's not okay to challenge the authority of what the parents did or didn't do. Some people, usually more avoidant, dismissive types, will say, what's the point? It doesn't matter. It's done. It's in the past. I got to move on. Well, it matters a lot.
Yeah.
And being able to talk about it and reflect on it and bring some increased coherence and decentralize yourself and realize what was happening to you was less about you and more about your parents.
Mm.
This is the psychological concept of differentiation.
Okay. Yeah, because I know we all have learned different things, and when you're in a relationship, with divorce as high as it is, what you did in your previous marriage is going to be different what you do in your current marriage because you got different person that you're dealing with. But you might have had something that happened to you around finances in your previous marriage that, you're trying not to bring over to the new marriage, but you end up doing it because, like you mentioned earlier, we might not feel comfortable to talking about that just yet, but, you still need to talk about it, bring it up, discuss it, and then, move forward. And hopefully the two of you move together in the same direction.
Mike, that's a huge topic. Is the divorce, remarriage, money conversation is a really difficult one because there's the hurt feelings of losing the relationship, and then there's the feelings about how the money was divided and understood and how it was used. And oftentimes when people aren't able to get their emotional needs met, the next lever that they have is that financial lever, and they pull it hard.
Yeah.
And there is a ripe opportunity for a lot of emotional injury. And those emotional injuries don't self-heal.
No. So I want you to tell the audience a little bit more about your book and how they can, pick it up and what they're going to learn from it.
Yeah, so the book is available on Amazon.com. I think that's probably a common way people now are buying books. It's both in print edition and Kindle. And so all you've got to do is search The Healthy Love and Money Way. Don't worry about the subtitle part. Amazon will get you there. That's the best way to get the book. Connecting with me, you see the title there, Healthy Love and Money. If you just type in healthyloveandmoney.com, that's the website. I have blogs. I have a few other courses. I'm on Instagram, if that's your kind of thing, LinkedIn. But what you're really going to get when you go into the book is I've sketched the highest level of what attachment theory is about. In this book, you're going to get a lot more application, a deeper understanding. You can also go to my website and take an attachment style quiz just to get an introduction to some of these ideas. But in the book, what you're going to do is you're going to also see some of the normalization of the journey of how we have a relationship with money, how I've gotten to these ideas. I think it really helps people come out of isolation when they hear other people talking about their problematic relationship with money. They realize it's not just me. I'm not the only one. But oftentimes around money, we feel so much shame that it stops us from even being able to acknowledge that we have a problem. So I hope by sharing this book, sharing my story of how I've gotten there, normalizing some of the challenges that I've had in my own marriage to get to the place where my wife and I are much more confident and capable to talk with each other about our money, you realize it's less about there being something intrinsically wrong with you and more about recognizing there's things that you need to have, you didn't get that you needed to have to help you be able to have the conversations you want to have.
Yeah. Well, I know you mentioned something when you said that we sometimes find out that we're not in this alone, that somebody else is going through it as well. And I know for men, a lot of times that's what we feel internally when we're going through some kind of situation. Yeah, that we're all alone and nobody understands and I don't know where to turn. But now, with your book, they have a way to turn.
That's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
Well, good.
Yeah. The vulnerability piece for men, that's a big deal.
Good. Well, Ed, I want to thank you so much for being on the show. It has definitely been a pleasure. I've learned some things, and I'm hoping our audience have too. But most importantly, I know they're going to get a better understanding of how they can get help if they're struggling with this. And I know I've talked to fathers, and I hear a lot of times that, man, she's just spending money like it's grow on trees, and she wants to keep up with the Joneses and all these other things, and they don't really understand what they can do about it. They just get frustrated because they don't know where to turn, they don't know who to talk to, and that just makes the situation even worse because the man just gets frustrated and frustrated and frustrated, and sooner or later he's going to snap.
That's exactly right.
So now let me ask you, do you counsel people just in person or over Zoom or something like that?
Yeah, I do work with people around the country.
Okay.
So certainly I see my office as well as around the country.
Okay. So they can get a hold of you, going through your website. Okay.
Yeah, that's the best place to start.
Okay. All right. Now let me ask you, before we go, you mentioned that they can take a test. Is that a test that they can print out or see, the results of?
Yeah, they can go to my website. They'll take the attachment style quiz. They'll enter, I think it's 20 questions or so. It's not a lot. And then they'll get instant feedback on kind of where they landed on one of the 4 different attachment styles and what that may mean for them.
Okay, because the reason I was wondering, is that something that a couple can do? Say a husband does it and then the wife does it, then they can compare and see where they are.
That would be a great activity for the couple to do together, is to both go to the website, take the quiz, and get their results, and then have a conversation about it.
Okay.
And the goal is, I'd love to remind couples financial empathy.
Yeah.
Empathy is about that ability to really tune into what the other person experienced. This is not about saying, see, I told you, you're the problem. If that's where you're coming at, like, we take a breath and let's reorient.
Yeah.
We don't want anything to be weaponized. We want to make it a safe environment.
Okay. And if they can't figure it out, call you.
Please.
Yes, absolutely. All right. Well, Ed, thank you so much for being on the show, and thank you for telling our audience about, money and how they can get over the anxiety and the frustration and dealing with the stress of working with your partner around your money and your finances.
Yeah,
so
absolutely, Mike. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, well, thank you. And so, ladies and gentlemen, that's going to be our show for today. And I really do thank Ed, for being on the show today and bringing that information, because I know it happens a lot. I know a lot of couples go into marriage thinking everything's hunky-dory, and then you find out that one spouse spends money not necessarily the way you would like to see them spend money, whether it's as a hobby or something like that, but you now have somebody that you can call Ed Coambs, let them know and talk it through. But if you are needing other resources, please go to the Father Show with MikeThompson.com. Click on resources, and you can find resources that can help you in whatever situation that you may be going through. Now, if you missed this show and want to catch it, you can always catch it on our YouTube channel, on our Facebook page, and on our website as well. So you can always catch us. And don't forget to subscribe. Let someone else know, but hit that notification bell, and that way you can always be notified when we have another show. And you can always catch us on, like I said, our Facebook page, LinkedIn, but you can also get the audio version on Spotify, Pandora, Alexis, and also on iHeartRadio and other apps. So all you have to do is look at that logo back here, and you can find us. So, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you for being a part of this show today. And once again, I want to say that I want to thank Ed Coambs for coming on the show. So until next week, stay safe, God bless, and I can't wait to see you then.